Hey there, it's Aaron, and it is June 18th, 2016, or 2016, either or. It's a little after 6, and today, as I record this, is Paul McCartney's birthday. I thought I would sit here and talk about what I own by Sir Paul, kind of like what I did with George back in November, going through his entire discography. Now, keep in mind, Paul has released a lot. Alright, you're going to notice right here, in case it shows, look at that. Hey, this CD holder holds only Beatles solo stuff, so John, Paul, George, Ringo, the Stones, and the Who. And then down there are some other stuff, Stones and an older copy of Tug of War. So, you see that big chunk there, that big empty chunk? That's all Paul. He's released a lot. Now I'm going to include everything, from solo stuff to Wings, up until today. So, and this is going to be on vinyl and CD. Now, a few albums I do have on cassette tape and 8-track, but for this I'm only going to show vinyl and CD, and I'll share my opinion on each of them. So, we start off in 1970 with McCartney. Released 1 week after it was announced that Paul was leaving the Beatles, hence ending the band. Many consider that April 10th, 1970 is the day that the Beatles broke up. What's unique about this album is that it's literally a solo album. He's the only musician on here, with the exception of some harmonies from Linda. So, yeah, it's a little experimental, but it's a fun album to listen to, and there's so many great songs on here. And the back cover here, that would be Paul right there, and then in his coat would be his daughter Mary, who was the first child of Paul and Linda, although Linda already had a child from her first marriage, Heather, who Paul adopted. So. Now, as for McCartney, it's a great album. In terms of favorite songs, I was going to take the CD, but in terms of good songs, The Lovely Linda's a nice little ditty. That would be something. Every Night, it's great. Hottest Sunglasses is fun. Junk was a song I think the Beatles were working on for some time, but nothing came out of it. I Like Man When He Was Lonely. Ooh You. Teddy Boy's another one. Listen to the one on the Beatles Anthology 3. It's hilarious. Maybe I'm Amazed, one of his big hits. But I think it became a hit when it was released as a live single from Wings Over America. I'm not going to show any older copies of the albums I have on CD. They're probably scattered hither and they're all over the place. So I'm just going to show the most recent reissue, but I will now. I do have an older CD version. As with older CD versions, I'm not going to show them just for the sake of time, but I do have an older CD version of it, probably that was pressed around the 1980s, and it sounds okay. The cover of which, for that CD, the booklet, is signed by Paul himself. Yeah, I met Paul McCartney, but that's a whole other story. I'm going to plan. Surprisingly, I have not made a video about that, so I'm going to have to make a video about that soon. In terms of the CD, this is the 2011 reissue on the, what do they call it? The Paul McCartney Archive Collection. The ongoing reissue campaign for Paul's albums. This is a good remaster of the album. Sounds really good. Some people think the 1993 remaster sounds better. I wouldn't be able to say because that's not what I have. So there's that. And the second disc only has, this was really disappointing for me, it only has like 25 minutes of material on it, which is just, why? Okay, then after that, this is not considered the second album by Paul McCartney. If you were to ask, I guess, if you were to go on the official Paul McCartney website, they would tell you his second album is McCartney 2, which makes sense. But the reason why that is because his next album was billed as a Paul and Linda McCartney album. I still count it as his second album because he's on most of it. I mean, Linda, rest in peace. I mean, she contributed as much as Paul did, but I still think of it as a Paul album featuring Linda. So that album I'm talking about is 1971's Ram. This is my favorite album by him. Wonderful album. Wonderful. Not well liked back in the day when it came out. Rolling Stone magazine gave it a pretty poor review, but now it's a classic. And it is a really great album. I could listen to this album over and over again. And it's one of the 2 albums that I own on vinyl, 8-track, cassette, and CD. No reel-to-reel. And the only other album I have on all 4 of those formats is the Moody Blues, A Question of Balance, which is an album I barely ever listen to. But, I mean, that's just the way it happened, that I ended up with so many copies of Ram. This is a great album. I love Ram. In terms of favorite songs, and again, all the songs are great on here. Too Many People, 3 Legs, Beer Boy, Uncle Albert, Smile Away is a fun rocker, Heart of the Country, Monkberry Moon Delight might be my favorite song by him. No Joke, just because it's so obscure, although I think it has been recently used in a movie, I think a couple years ago. Hall Pass? Yeah, but it's a great song. Eat at Home is actually a very raunchy tune, lyrically, but great song. Long-Haired Lady. Both Ramons are great, and then it ends with Sitting in the Back. And then it ends with Back Seat of My Car. Wonderful album, just wonderful. It's a very warm album. So, and with this album, it was the first time that he was working with a proper band. So, along with he and Linda, he was working with, I'm probably going to butcher the names here, Dave Spinoza, Hugh McCracken, and Denny Seiwell. Now, of those 3 guys that I just mentioned, Denny Seiwell stayed with Paul long-term because he was interested in being in a long-term band with Paul and Linda. I do have an earlier CD version of Ram, but the most recent version that came out was in 2012, which sounds great, and it has a second disc that has material on it, actually. A good 33 minutes of it, I think. Alright. Then in 1971, Paul decided that he was going to put together a new group. He already had Denny Seiwell with him, and he had Linda. And then he remembered Denny Lane, who used to be in the Moody Blues. But he was really only in the Moody Blues for, what, 1 album? But I think the Beatles and the Moody Blues had done a tour together, so I think that's how they sort of met. So, and if you haven't seen Paul's Wingspan documentary, go watch it. It is very one-sided. They could have gotten a lot more interviewees, but for what it is, it's good. I mean, it tells the story. If you don't know the story of Wings, go ahead and watch it. But as Paul said in that documentary, he wanted to have somebody like John. That was sort of a singer-songwriter sort of guy. So he picked Denny Lane, and he stayed. And of the members in Wings, the 3 consistent members throughout their entire career were Paul, Linda, and Denny Lane. So with Denny Lane in the group, they made their first album, Wings Wildlife. This album was made in 1 week. And I don't think the band had a name yet, and from what I know, when Linda gave birth to Stella, there were some complications in her birth, and that she could have been a miscarriage. And Paul felt that Stella was brought to them on the wings of angels. So Wings, good image, good name for a band that needed a name. So I think that's how they got the name. However, this first album is just... Remember that I said it was made in 1 week? Sure sounds like it. Again, there are some good songs on here, but it is just... I think it's their weakest. Of the 7 albums that Wings released, it is their weakest. In terms of favorite songs, Mumbo, I guess, is okay. Big Bop is really. Love is Strange is a great song. I think that's my favorite on here. Wildlife, the title track, good. Some people never know. I can't even remember your singer. Tomorrow is good, and Dear Friend, which was Paul's way of trying to ease the tensions between him and John, with John feeling that a lot of the songs on Ram were about him, especially Too Many People. So he wrote in response, How Do You Sleep? And Paul wrote Dear Friend, which is the lesser known of those songs. In terms of a CD copy, I ripped this with the USB turntable, so it's good enough for me. All right. In 1972, Paul decided to add another member to the group, a fifth member, Henry McCulloch, formerly of Joe Cocker's Grease Band. And at the time I'm recording this, Henry McCulloch passed away earlier this week. He was very sick. He suffered from a heart attack, which left him really brain damaged, I think. According to Denny Sywell, that the guy couldn't perform anymore. Shout out to him, and rest in peace, Henry. Now, with Henry in the group, the five of them made one album together, this lineup. They released a few singles, including Hi Hi Hi, Sea Moon. But the one album that they did make with this lineup was Red Rose Speedway. Better than Wildlife, but not by much. This is an okay album. There's some film on here. And I gotta be careful with showing this on the screen here, because there is some nudity in the booklet here, so. Are the songs in order here? Yeah, they're in order. Yeah. It's like a nice color booklet here. Again, I'm not going to show the entire thing here. Oh, this is okay. This is safe to show. Nice live shots of the band. Alright, so in terms of favorites on here, Big Barn Ben is great. My Love was their first #1 hit. It was Wings' first #1 hit. Speaking of Henry McCulloch, he played the guitar solo on there. According to Paul, Henry just improvised and just said, "Do you mind if I put this on the song here?" And it's a beautiful solo. So, like his big contribution to that Wings there, providing that guitar solo on My Love. Get on the Right Thing is great. One More Kiss, Little Lamb Dragonfly, Single Pigeon, Win the Night, I guess is okay. Loop, First Indian on the Moon. I'd be lying if I said I remember it. And the medley of Holding Me Tight, Lazy Dynamite, Hands of Love, and Power Cut. It's not bad, actually. Yeah, this isn't a bad album. It's better than Wildlife. And I said not by much. I mean, I would say it's a 3.5 album. With Wildlife, I would give it 3. But it's not bad. And as for a CD version, I ripped this with the USB turntable as well. So, 1973, Paul decides that Wings are going to make their next album in Lagos, Africa. According to Paul, this did not bode well with Henry and Denny Sywell, and the two decided to call up the night before and say, "We're not going to Lagos, we're going to leave the band." I've heard other stories. For Henry, from what I read, he and Paul got into a fight, not physical fight, a verbal argument. They just kept arguing with each other one day in the studio, from what I know, and it came to the point where Henry just left the studio. He just went up and left. And the next day he called up and said that he was leaving the band. As far as Denny Sywell goes, according to Denny Sywell, he left because he felt that Paul wasn't working the way that he did when they made Ram. Either way, the two of them were gone, and they were left at the core 3 members of Paul, Linda, and Eddie Lang. And they went to Lagos. Not the best place to go over there. They saw that the studio hadn't been built. It's well documented how this album was made or when it was made, all the stories behind it, and that album is Band on the Run. What an album. Of the Wings albums, this is my favorite, and I think many people would agree this is their strongest. It is a great album. from beginning to end. I'm specifically talking about the US version. I know that the UK version has a slight difference in that there is no Hell on Wheels as the 8th track. And I did not know this until they did this reissue in 2010. So that became very, very annoying when putting all the songs into iTunes. What? There's no Hell on Wheels? So I reconfigured it myself. Forbidden Hell on Wheels is on the album. I just cannot imagine that song not being on there. It's the way I listened to the song for the longest time. Title track is a bit overplayed, but I'll allow it. It's a great song. Jet, great power pop rocker. Bluebirds, Mr. Vanderbilt. I'm liking that Paul's starting to play that a little bit more. Or in recent years he's played it a little bit more, because it's a great song. Let Me Roll It, from what I know, Paul's current wife, Nancy Chevelle, apparently that's her favorite song by her husband. I read that in an article somewhere. Pneumonia, that's good. No Words is probably the weakest off the album, but I still like it. Hell on Wheels. Picasso's Last Words is probably my favorite song off the album. And 1985. It's a great way to close out the album. And again, along with Miss Vanderbilt, Paul has been playing that more in concert. So, yeah, this is a great album. And I had 2 copies of this on vinyl. One of them I sold, but I decided to keep this one because I got it when I was on a service trip during spring break with my college about 2 years ago in 2014. One of the records, or I found a bunch of records and I just, held on to them. And then we were helping set up for a flea market. And then this was at a women's ministry. And then the person there from the women's ministry just said, well, you helped out. You can have whatever you want. So we didn't have to pay anything. I would have donated some money, but luckily I'm glad we got to keep the stuff for free because I didn't have any money in my wallet at that point. I was going to have to hit the ATM. But the cool thing about this one, which wasn't with my other copy that I sold on eBay, it actually has some of the packaging in here. Poster, which I'm not going to fold out, is in here. The lyric sheet. Another copy of Bound on the Run, probably from 1980s, but the last one it was released was in 2010, and it was the first album added to the Paul McCartney Archive collection. Not only does it come with a second disc, but it came with, not only does this reissue come with a second disc, it comes with a DVD, which has the long-lost documentary of One Hand Clapping, which is a documentary that features the next lineup in Wings. Because shortly after making this album, 2 new guys were added to the group to replace Denny Sidewell and Henry McCulloch. Replacing Henry McCulloch was a guy named Jimmy McCulloch. No, they are not related. Henry has a G in his name, in his last name, at least. Yeah, Jimmy McCulloch. What a great guitarist. Well worth looking up. He had quite the career, and unfortunately he passed away many years ago. And the drummer was a guy named Jeff Britton, and he did not last very long. He was in the group for a very short time. From what I'm hearing, he and Jimmy did not get along. I'm not sure if that's why he left, or I don't know what the story is, but that documentary, One Hand Clapping, is on the DVD, along with a couple of other bonus features of them shooting the album cover, which is pretty cool to see, and some promotional videos and whatnot. So.